Welcome back to my channel. In this video we are going to take a look at how to process an H-alpha luminance and RGB image of Messier 81 and Messier 82, Bode's galaxy and the Cigar galaxy. Bode's galaxy is a grand design spiral galaxy in the constellation of Ursa Major. It has an impressive diameter of 96,000 light years, and it harbors a supermassive black hole in the middle that has a mass of 70 million times that of our Sun. Messier 81 and Messier 82 is located about 11.8 million light years away from Earth. To produce this image, I captured RGB data with broadband filters, luminance data with broadband filter, and H-alpha data with narrowband filter, and then I tried to put it all together in the PixInsight. Join me in taking a look at how I put all of this together, and in the end you will see the end result, and we can also compare to an image I took with my Canon DSLR back in 2021. We are going to take a look at the processing of Bode's galaxy and the Cigar galaxy, also known as Messier 81 and Messier 82. I did process this and photograph this in 2021. I think it was the third session that I had in this hobby altogether. I used my Canon DSLR back then, and I'm going to show you that image at the end of this video and compare it to this image. There's a lot more frames than you are used to see in my SHO processing videos, and that is because with this object I used a combination of broadband and narrowband filters. So I have luminance, red, green and blue, as well as H-alpha narrowband for those red nebulosity details in the galaxy. This image was captured during 10 different sessions between December of 2024 and the end of March in 2025. I have a total of 204 light frames and a total integration time of 17 hours. And that is 55 light frames of H-alpha, 53 light frames of luminosity, and 32 light frames of red, green, and blue individually. The exposures for this target is 5 minutes or 300 seconds, and I will show you how I will manage the overexposed parts here. Like you can see, in red, green, and blue, it's fairly even, although I have some gradients here. In H-alpha, it looks rather fine. And in luminosity, you will see that you have a very overexposed core, because 5 minutes, it's fairly long for a galaxy, even though it's a bit faint and small, especially for my focal length of 510 millimeters. You could crop this in to make it a little more zoomed in, but I decided to keep it like this. And hopefully I will be able to get some faint filaments, dust and gas clouds in this image also, and not just a black background. These are all screen transfer stretched now, and I haven't done anything yet. So we will start with the normal linear processing for this image. The processing for this is going to be a bit different than I normally do for my SHO images, so bear with me here, and hopefully you will make some sense out of this shortened video. We will see if I will make an extensive, in-depth, step-by-step processing video for this image. But for now, I hope you can follow along in this shortened version. So the first thing I did for the luminosity and the H-alpha was to do a dynamic crop, an automated dynamic background extraction, and then I also used the gradient correction, because there were some gradients here. I took these images or gathered this data on so many nights, and I had the moon up some nights, and there were some other issues, and you all know that broadband is a bit more sensitive than narrowband. After that, I also ran a blur exterminator, of course, and then noise exterminator. And then the H-alpha here was ready for stretching. But for you that have watched my recent videos, I have opted to use the SETI Astro statistical stretch and the Sketchpad IHDR, but for this image I used generalized hyperbolic stretch for all stretching, and I will demonstrate that shortly. I'm going to keep the H-alpha here so I can show you that later. I did the same thing with luminosity, and I won't show you that, but one thing that is a bit different from doing SHO and narrowband is that when you're doing an RGB integration, an RGB image, then it is a bit hard to stretch the individual channels and then combine. So what I did was to combine the RG and B early on in the linear processing, and then I stretched the RGB. That's not something that I normally do, but it was a bit hard to get the colors to show up correctly if I didn't do it that way. Looking here at the individual steps, here's the RGB integration, and I haven't done anything to this other than integrating R, G, and B. And after that, I did a color calibration after an image solve. And for color calibration, I used the spectrophotometric color calibration tool, of course. And that calibrated the colors a little bit here. I don't know if you see such a big difference, but there are some subtle differences here. After that step, I also ran the automated dynamic background extraction, and after that, as normal, the blur exterminator and the noise exterminator. We can close every image here except the first one, and we can compare a little bit the first image here with no processing, and the second to the left with all of the linear processing steps done for the RGB image here. And you can see here that there is a little bit better result here. The colors are better, they are calibrated, and the stars are smaller, of course, and there is no noise in the image here. So that was a good first step, I would say. But now it was time to do some stretching, and then we are going to start here with the starless version. So if you do a screen transfer function on this, you can see that it does not look good at all. It is very overblown, so to speak. So how do you stretch this image without blowing out the center part of the galaxy? Well, we turn to generalized hyperbolic stretch, and this is the fast version of it. You can do it in so many different ways. You can also look at my SHO processing step-by-step tutorial, and there I talk about GHS in more depth. So we're going to set our first symmetry point here in the middle of the histogram here. Click on the Send to SP. We're going to zoom out, and I don't really do one initial stretch until 25%. And for this image, I also want to make sure that I don't stretch or overblow the center part of the galaxy. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to leave the local intensity alone completely. I want a stretch that is evenly distributed. Then I'm going to take my protect highlights, and I'm going to pull that down to about the middle of the screen here, making sure that I don't stretch or don't stretch as much in the right part of the histogram line here. Then I'm going to take my stretch factor. I'm going to pull that up a little bit. I haven't opened a preview window or anything yet. I'm just interested in making a nice even curve here in my histogram. So now I'm opening up my preview window, and then I'm going to do this stretch maybe like 5, 6, 7, possibly 8 times until I get a starting point for this stretch here. So I'm going to apply this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. I think that's a good starting position. And now you might think, well, this doesn't look good at all. Well, just bear with me a little bit here. I'm going to reset this, and then I'm going to switch from generalized hyperbolic transformation type to linear. And that will let me manipulate the black point here with this lever. So I'm taking this, dragging it to the right, applying that, resetting the tool, selecting linear again, dragging the black point one more time, resetting the tool, and now you can see that we have something to work with. I can zoom in here on the galaxy. You can see if you click here that it is on the verge of blowing out in the middle here, but at least it's not super white. So what we want to do here is we want to preserve this area, of course. And you could go for what you normally do, stretching, so you would add more contrast also here. But that's not the main focus right now. The main focus is getting as many details as possible in the background and in here without blowing out the core. We will still have some blown out effects from luminosity maybe, but that we will take care of later in later processing steps. I want to reveal more information in this faint area, so I'm going to click here. That will select the area in the histogram here, but I can't forget to click Send to SP. That will mark this area as the symmetry point. I will set my local intensity now to around 300-400. And I will also protect my highlights again, even more this time maybe, below the 50% line there. And then I will use my stretch factor to increase. You can see now that I am protecting the highlight areas here, but as you can see here on the curve, you still stretch a little bit of those areas. So you would want to take it easier. So make a nice curve like this. Don't overdo it too much, but keep it like that. Apply that stretch to the image. You can reset the tool here. You can see, well, maybe I want a little bit more. I'm going to repeat my last step there. I will set my local intensity. I will pull protect highlights even further down this time. And I will make a small stretch and then apply that. When that's done again, I will repeat my linear step or linear transformation type, and I will adjust the black point a little bit down again. And now I can zoom in here and inspect to see what has happened here in this image. If I have revealed every piece of information that I wanted, or if there's still some information that I want. But I can see that I have a lot of red here. I have this nice and exposed the details in here. We will try to reveal these later. We're not completely blown out here. It's on the verge of I would say, but not completely. For the sake of this video now, we will stop here, but you can now see how you can use the generalized hyperbolic stretch and protect highlights to
really stretch the information in the fainter part of the image while trying to preserve the more highlighted parts of the image here. For the stars in this image, I actually used the RGB stars from the star exterminator process because I also did an image solver very early in the linear process this time, since I'm not stretching the RG and B channels separately, but integrating them and stretching them after integration. That gave me some advantage in regards to time saving, because the image was already solved and I had already ran through the spectrophotometric color calibration. So the RGB stars were already calibrated. I stretched the stars using GHS, as I normally do, and then I slightly adjusted the colors. When I say adjusted the colors, I only increased the saturation a little bit, keeping the original color information in the image here. Now we're getting to the interesting part. How do you put together your RGB image together with the luminosity and the H-alpha, but only in the red channel? And you don't want to add the H-alpha on top of everything, because then everything would be red. So in this case, I started with my RGB stretched image, and I've adjusted the saturation a little bit on this image. As you can see here, I've tried to get the blue to pop out a little bit more in this image. I haven't really added any blue here. I've just adjusted saturation for this part and the M82 here. You don't want to add saturation to the background. That will make it a little bit messy, I would say. So what's next? Well, we have to add H-alpha to the RGB image here. And how do we do that in a good way? There are so many ways. I've done it differently in other images before, but if you have the toolbox here under script, you have a script called combine HA with RGB. And this is the one that I'm going to use, but I'm going to show you a way to use it to maximize your result here. First, I'm going to uncheck linear image because this is a stretched image. I'm going to select my RGB starless image here as the base. I'm going to select my H-alpha starless stretched image here as the H-alpha view. And now you might see that you have some issues with red, even though it is very nice in the arms of the galaxy here. You can see that it adds everything from the H-alpha into the RGB image, making it excessively red. What I did was to take the RGB image and split the channels, extracting RG and B, and then I'm going to use the RGB red as a mask in this tool. Now you can see that when I'm adding H-alpha and subtracting the red channel, while adding it. Then I'm left with the most brighter parts of the H alpha here. As you can see, you want these nebulosities in the arms of the galaxy. You can play around a little bit with the amount here. I think I went with something around 2.5 here, making sure that you can really see those red H alpha nebulosity spots in the galaxy here. That's something that you want. So I accepted that, and then we end up with an image looking like this. You can also see that it's a big difference up here for M82. I'm going to open up the image before adding HA, and you can see that we have added a lot of H alpha information here to the image that wasn't visible before in the RGB. So I think this is a great success. I will show you also a comparison with the galaxy only here. You can see that on the right here we have only the RGB starless with some color corrections, and on the left here we have RGB starless with some added H alpha in the spiral arms here, and that looks very nice. The next step here, of course, is then we want to add luminosity to the image. We have a luminosity here that I've stretched, and this is where all the dust and gas filaments are visible, and that's something I really hoped would happen with my 53 5-minute light frames of luminosity here. So I want to integrate this with my RGB H alpha image. So that means that I'm going to take my HaLRGB combination tool. I'm going to put this in the luminosity box. And then I will take my triangle and drag it and release it on top of my RGB HA. And this will add the luminosity information on top of everything here. This will also make it a lot brighter, as you can see here, and we will have to take care of that in the processing steps to come. At this point, it is really the normal processing steps, I would say, that I do for SHO, but I won't add a synthetic luminance to this since I have a authentic luminance and I've already added that. So next thing I did was to run some sharpening. I don't want to over sharpen this. It's a very small object with my 500 millimeters. I ran through noise exterminator one more time instead of TGV denoise, removing some of the noise in the image here. I made some final color corrections here, and that was just to increase the saturation even one more time. And now I'm faced with how do we handle the core here, the blown out core. Well, we use HDR Multiscale Transformation tool. And how do we do that? I will demonstrate on the image here. I want to make sure that I don't overdo it. I don't want to use the tool HDR Multiscale Transformation on the entire image, because that will affect the background areas. It will remove filaments here, and it will be too sharp, so to speak. What I did in this case was to extract luminance out of this image, and then I will use this as a mask. But before that, I will use histogram transformation on it to remove the background, almost everything, and then decrease the midtones here, making it very faint, or fainter, I would say then. I actually did, this is the luminance mask that I actually used. I was using it a bit too much here. I will close that. What you can do then is you can apply this luminance mask to your image. You can disable show mask, and then you can run your HDR multiscale transform, and that will apply it mostly to these objects. And you won't have the full effect of it, because even though you can manipulate the number of layers, overdrive settings, iterations, deringing, and whatever, I find this tool to make a too big of an impact on the image, and I don't really like it. But before we do it, make sure that you check to intensity here. And that means that you will try to preserve the color of the target image. And you also want to use a lightness mask to protect some of the darker areas. Then you can run this on the image. And then we can compare. If we zoom in on the galaxy here, for example, and this is after, you can switch back and forth here. You can see that before, this is a big blown out portion, and now you have really exposed the details and minimized this. Even though even the M42 up here, you can see that we are exposing the details in this image. If you want to even more decrease the effects on the image here, you can take this mid-tone lever, you can pull it down even more, and we can go back, we can remove this mask, and then we can apply the mask again. And then you simply redo the HDR Multiscale Transformation tool, and that will decrease the effects even more. So you don't have as a big of effect on the actual image, but you will gain a lot of information in the middle here. So this was my final result of the processing steps. We started with, I'm going to open up the image here, the RGB integration with just some color corrections. And on the right here, you have the final results of the starless version. And you have RGB with added H-alpha, with added luminosity, and then we added the normal non-linear processing steps on this. And of course, HDR Multiscale Transformation also. Now we have the starless version processed and ready to be used. We have the stars version, and then we simply use pixel math with the screen formula. And when that completed, I did some final curves transformation just to increase the saturation a little bit on this image. Making the final version here of Bode's Galaxy Messier 81 with Messier 82, some dust filaments in the background. Maybe you could have stretched this a little bit more, maybe not. It's always hard to say. Maybe you could have cropped this image a little bit, cropped it in like this. But I also like to keep the original composition of the image here. And I think this is a fairly good result. We can compare it now to the image that I took back in 2021. This was actually the third object ever photographed in this hobby. This image is 16 4-minute exposures and my very, very limited processing knowledge at that time. So you can see that we have the same object. I will rotate that image so we can compare it a little bit better. Messier 81 here and Messier 81 to the left now. Of course, a lot more data, but also a lot more knowledge in processing these kinds of images. And I will leave you with this image now. This was actually the last piece of data I had for this season. The next video will be my statistics and image presentation video, my summary of the 2024-25 astrophotography season, and then we're starting to look forward to a completely new season.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and please give it a thumbs up if you like it, and consider subscribing if you're not already doing so. Until the next video, I wish you have clear skies.